So, what's it like to work with people like Paul McCartney, Elton John, Carole King, Dan Fogelberg? Today's guest is going to talk about that about 30 minutes into today's episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. Hi there. My name is Matthew Blades, the host of Learn from People Who Lived It, and I'm glad you're here for this episode. We're going to sit down today with a dude named Jim who was born in South Carolina, found his love of music at 7, and turned that into one hell of a career. I'm glad you're here, and thank you so much for coming back each week to check out Learn from People Who Lived It. As I always say, we don't have any ads on this podcast, and that is so intentional. If you could do me a favor and just leave us a review where you enjoy podcasts, or even better, share this with a friend, that would be freaking fantastic. As Jim says, let's get the fuck on with it. Here we go.
Looking for no bullshit conversation about mental health? Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
Hi, I'm Jim. I'm from Los Angeles.
Let's go, Jim. What story are you here to share today?
I am here to tell my story about a kid from a small West Texas town who had a dream of making it in the music business. Moved to Los Angeles to pursue that dream, got lost along the way, and it took a major life event to grab me by the shirt collar and go, listen, you idiot, there's not a limitless reservoir of tomorrows. Get the fuck on with it.
Who do you hope is listening to this right now?
Anybody who's having a hard time in pursuit of their dreams and facing those challenges, that's who I hope I can reach, because my story does involve exactly that, coming back from the abyss.
Love it, man. Well, I'm glad that you're here today, and welcome everybody to Learn from People Who Lived It. Yeah, so Dr. Dave is up in the right-hand corner. He's our resident psychiatrist and just all-around good guy. He's going to help us out and decipher patterns. Any questions that we don't know the answers to, he's like our own little Wikipedia. This guy is so knowledgeable. He's got so much good, useful information up in this brain of his. And so our job will be to turn to you, brother, when we don't understand something. How are you, Dave?
Well, Matthew, it's a pleasure as always to be here today.
Yeah, good. I want to jump into today's conversation because as you're going to hear in this episode, one of those major crossroads that Jim was faced with was the untimely death of his closest friend, Claud. How old were you when Claud died?
Well, let's see. Let's do the math. It was 1997 when he died. And so I'm going to say late 30s.
Late 30s. Okay.
Yeah.
Jim doesn't know this about me. Dave knows this about me. My closest friend is a guy named Quoc Bui. He is a sensational Vietnamese kid that I met when I was 15 years old in my high school orchestra class. And Quoc and I became very close and very instant friends. And for 35 years, we were lucky enough to share an incredible friendship. And just about 6 weeks ago, Quoc died from a cancer trial, and he is no longer with us. And so when I tell you that I'm happy that you are here, Jim, it's a loaded happiness, because I'm glad to be around company who understands a little bit about what I'm going through right now, what I'm feeling right now. Yeah. And as we always say on this podcast, the number one goal that we have is to help people feel less alone. And so in a strange way, Jim, you're going to bring that my way today, right?
Wonderful.
I'm going to feel a little less like I'm on an island and like somebody else understands me and gets what I'm saying. And so I definitely want to lean into that. But we generally on this podcast start with the first 10 years of people's lives.
Okay.
And so will you give Dave and I an understanding of like, who are you, Jim? Who is little Jim from 0 to 10? Where do you guys live? What's your dynamic like? What does growing up look like for you?
Who am I? I keep asking that question every day. I look in the mirror, it's like, who the fuck are you, man? What happened to you? Yeah. 0 to 10. Came from a broken home. If I had to give it in a nutshell, my parents divorced when I was 9. It was a very tumultuous breakup. Left a scar as deep as a Mariana Trench in my psyche. It's like, man, if this kind of vitriol and and hatred is what marriage is about. I don't want any fucking part of it. And it really did kind of inform a lot of who I was for the rest of my life. But it was, if we're talking about the general view of who I was, sort of, I look back, Matthew and Dr. Dave, and I find an insecure kid, kind of a little self-pitying, you know, chubby, and there were a few things that kind of directed my life and some decisions that I made that kind of turned things around for me. One was really what I call my first man cave. And my parents divorced when I was 9, so my dad left, and my little brother had been born at that time of the world as well, and 1964, a very tumultuous time, and well, that left us with a bedroom shortage, and I was the odd boy out. So here's this little day bed in the kitchen that's going to be your sleeping arrangement, little Jimmy. And it was just horrible. And my grandmother had come to live with us, so that was another reason I was sort of the odd man out. But, you know, people would come in the middle of the night and turn on the faucets and switches and everything. Well, there was a closet just off of the kitchen. It was an oversized closet that my dad had been using as a dark room. And I asked my mom, hey, could maybe I have that as my bedroom? Could I just empty out all the stuff? It was completely loaded to the gills with everything. Could I have that as my bedroom? And so, well, let's wait till it's cleared out. Let's have a conversation about it. And my very first act of self-determinism, guys, was me going, you know what? That's mine. I plant my flag hereby in the name of Queen Isabella, and I waited till everybody went to sleep, and very quietly went in that. I took my little shitty day bed and stood it on its side very quietly and went in bottle by bottle, because it was a no man's land, you know, a hazmat site with all these boxes and bottles and everything. Very quietly took bottle by bottle, and it was completely jam-packed. And then after about 2 hours, I finally put my little bed in there at the age of 9. And it was my first act of self-determinism. And it kind of shaped the rest of my life. And it informed me on so many levels of, the lessons I learned were, sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness later than to ask for permission, you know, beforehand. If it is to be, it's up to me. I realize that I'm going to have to I have to make my own decisions. But the biggest thing that it taught me was, and I would later use these lessons in producing my first PBS special, whatever mountain is ahead of you, it can be broken down into step by step, piece by piece, doable little chunks. And if you can break it down into those doable little chunks, then you can get there. There's no mountain that's too high. And for me to look at that room of that, my dad's, you know, photographic stuff and his developer chemicals and all that, just one little thing, step by step. It took forever, but all it was one individual action at a time. So, you know, I look back at myself when I was that age, and I think of kind of a self-pitying, chubby kid. And here was this one act that kind of helped shape me. It gave me so much self-esteem, guys. It really made me just think, I did something for myself, and I'm taking a stand. This is who I am. This is my room. And then, you know, this insurmountable thing. So later in producing this PBS special, you know, again, insurmountable. So, well, okay, let's break it down to number 1, secure the venue. Number 2, you know, it was literally like this 40 item checklist. And I've applied that to so many things in my life. It's like there's so many mountains ahead of me and any of us at any given time. It's like, well, yeah, okay, that's the mountain, but what's just look down, you put your foot right there at the very next step, and then follow that with the next step after that. And eventually it's like, shit, I'm halfway up the mountain.
Jim, a question that I had was, did you get any pushback when you started taking over that space?
No, I didn't. Well, first of all, it was all stealthily done in the dead of night. And the first words I heard the following morning was my mom, upon witnessing this sea of boxes and bottles where my bed had been. And I heard her go, "Oh my God." And there was nothing I had anticipated the pushback,
yeah,
Dave, but there is something about the clarity of my decision, and there's something to be said about that. It's the level of determination that you have when it's so clear and so powerful. There's nothing left to do for somebody else other than to go, "Oh, okay, this is what's going down. This is what's happened. This is reality now." So that's something to be said about, if you want to make a move, you just fucking just jump in and right.
Yeah.
Right. So at 9 years old, so one thing that jumps out at me is your parents didn't come up with your dad giving up his hobby for you to have a room. Like, that wasn't their first intention, right? So at 9 years old, you had to take that back.
Right.
That's a difficult position to be in at such a young age, and to develop that confidence of being able to speak up for yourself. Just the size difference. A lot of times kids are intimidated by their parents because they're smaller and
right.
hold a position of authority, and most kids growing up have some level of respect or fear for that authority. So that's a big step forward to be able to assert yourself in that way. And it's interesting that when they saw your determination, they agreed to it.
Right.
So they almost respected it, right? Like, it was like, shit.
Right. That's right.
Guy. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You can't help but kind of, respect somebody who's made that level of commitment. And, my dad was out of the picture. He had moved out, and so he had this closet there that was just it was like, it wasn't just his photographic stuff. It was like the no man's land. It was the catch-all, so.
He wasn't there to give you a hard time about moving the stuff out.
Yeah, and I think he lacked the authority at that point to do so. So that was maybe it was a light bulb that went off. It's like, okay, well, in this new world of a fractured, broken home, I'm going to have to fend for myself. And you make your decisions, and the level of clarity, like I said, of that decision. Everything falls in line. And that's been a theme that I've found, when we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit in my story of when I did later decide my best friend died, and I decided to jump into my recording plans. Instead of all the equivocation that I had before, now I was really fully committed. And man, when, what's the Goethe quote, when one is fully committed, I was hoping you guys would jump in and save me on that.
I was like, sorry, buddy, you're on your own.
Sorry, buddy, you're on your own, pal. But when you are truly fully committed, the universe responds, and doors just fling open. It's really this magic, this fairy dust that does happen when you really have committed. So my mother was an English teacher. She spoke 7 languages, taught 5. Latin was one of them. She loved breaking down words, the etymology of words. So the word decide means to cut. Incision is cut, decide. So when you truly do decide, you cut yourself off from the other options. In other words, you have taken the leap off the diving board, and there's no going back to the safety of the diving board. So time and time again in my life, I've found that when I've really decided and jumped in fully, then the universe goes, oh, I guess he's serious. Let's support him.
Can we stay on that for a little bit, and we can go ahead and jump ahead in your story? That's fine. But Dave, I actually want to talk to you about that because that leap of faith is what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And it is. It's terrifying, especially if you're not even really sure what your plan B is. Like you just have this thing in your head. You're like, this is the thing I want to do. And to Jim's credit, like he goes on to associate himself, and there are people in Jim's world named Elton John, Carole King, Paul McCartney, Dan Fogelberg. Like there are people who skip the fact that they're famous. Well, the one thing famous people all have in common is they have taken the fucking leap like you can't even believe. And they have turned a self-belief. They've turned that thing inward and on themselves like most people can't even do. And so I'm going to guess, and we can talk about this and get into the weeds about it, but I'm going to guess, Jim, that once you started to surround yourself with people like that, it became even easier to keep flying through the air and keep jumping time and time again, no?
Let's see. So I had originally thought of piano tuning. My stories, I played in a couple of bands back in Amarillo, Texas, and both of those bands I played in, the keyboard players could tune pianos. And I thought, well, that's a great way to go off and make $25, which is the going rate in the panhandle of Texas at the time. And I thought, well, if they could do it, if they learned it, then I could learn it too. So I wrote to all the piano tuning schools in America. I found the best one in Cleveland, Ohio. I went there and got the skills under my belt, came back to Amarillo and tuned a little bit. And then before I moved to Los Angeles. So I moved to LA with the idea, guys, that piano tuning is going to be a little sideline. I got somebody who wants to say hello. A little feline friend who wants to join us here.
Perfect.
Yes. So I moved to LA with this new skill and thought, this is going to be a little sideline while I'm going to be the next Jackson Browne. That was the original thing. Well, it turns out I would become the next Jackson Browne piano tuner. So this skill that was going to be a sideline kind of blossomed, and eventually I just kind of kept hitting the snooze button on my aspirations, because I really wanted to be that big singer-songwriter. And right out of the gate, I started getting these great clients. And let's fast forward a little bit to the mid-'80s. I helped to develop the original MIDI adapter for acoustic piano. And that's where things really started to open up, because at one point I was the only guy in the world you could get this revolutionary thing from. And I got flown to England a dozen times by McCartney and Elton and Phil Collins and Keith Emerson, and the royalty of rock was just rolling out their red carpet for me. And who needs to be the struggling artist and this, all these artistic aspirations? Well, and you're surrounded by all these people that are your heroes, and they are giving you this great support. But I didn't, to sort of speak to your comment earlier, Matthew, I didn't really announce my other world to them so much, my aspirations, because I'm there as a piano technician. I'm there as their trusted, piano artisan. But it really wasn't until my friend Claud died of a heart attack at the age of 37 that it just shattered everything, because Claude was my North Star. Claude was we would read Shakti Gawan's creative visualization book, and we'd do our mastermind sessions and go, this is what I want to accomplish, and we'd support each other and all that. And I could see one by one, guys, him just check off all these things on like a fucking grocery list, become the top LA session guy. Boom, done. Wow, okay. become, hit songwriters, hit songs by Celine Dion. And then he would have these dreams of what kind of a family he wanted to create. And he would, right down to the little nuancy things he would envision his kid coming in, Daddy, come make me some pancakes. So I would just go, ladies and gentlemen, stand back, watch how it's done, because this guy is going to manifest every single one of those things. And then when he had his heart attack and I'm sitting there in the hospital room and feeling his cold hand, and I'm recalling this beautiful, beautiful sonata that he had written, that he played for me on piano, and only two or 3 weeks prior to that. And he had his fears of stepping out as a solo artist too, but that's what he wanted to do. Yes, it was all fine and well to have these other things going on, but he wanted people to know it was in his heart, this beautiful sonata. And I'm just thinking in this hospital room, what the fuck happens to those dreams now? They're just disintegrating and vaporizing into the air. And I saw how easily that could happen to me, to anyone. It's like, just because you have a clarity of vision that's no guarantee. Right. There's not a limitless reservoir of tomorrows. And that was the thing that made me just get the fuck on with it. And also it forced me to kind of reevaluate the original dream. Well, the original dream was singer-songwriter guy writing hit songs. And well, that didn't really ring true for me anymore. Well, then what does? Well, I had been in between trying to write the next big hit song. I would go to the piano and I'd write these things that kind of amused me or gave me spiritual gratification. Man, when I do this little 16th note pattern in B minor, and then I do the sharp 5, it's like, oh, and then put my James Taylor influenced kind of melodies on top of that, and the folk Appalachian sort of thing, this bitch's brew kind of cauldron, of all my influences. That gave me such great gratifications. No one's ever going to hear these songs, but man, it doesn't feel good to play these things on piano. And then when Claude died, I thought, okay, if I get that tap on the shoulder like he did, time's up, pencils down, turn in your assignments as is. I want to have something that I leave behind where people go, okay, I see what he was about. And so I wanted to get these pieces, record these piano pieces under one roof. If 10 people hear this record, that's fine with me. I started getting people in my universe to kind of support this dream. And as I said, when you really decide, cut off all other options and jump in, the universe responds. First person I called was my friend Davey Johnstone, the guitar player for Elton John. So Davey, I'm thinking about doing this solo piano record, piano featured instrumentals, and oh, that's great, man. You want me to play on it? Before I could even have to muster the nerve to say, would you do it? And then just like dominoes, everything started to fall, and everybody started, yeah, that's great. Let's all help Jim. And that became my first album, Northern Seascape. And to cut to the chase, there was a bidding war of 7 labels who wanted to pick up the master that I completed. 4 of whom put paper on the table. And then eventually Angel EMI gave this huge advance. And that was my first of what would become 10 solo piano featured instrumental records, and 4 times on the Billboard Top 20 and 75 million streams on my music worldwide. Brilliant. So it all, for me, it happened. And I would hope that the listeners, I hope it doesn't take a friend of yours dying for you to get that grabbing by the shirt collar and say, listen, get on with it. But that's what it took for me, was for me to have that shock of like, yeah, you can just keep hitting that snooze button on your dreams forever if you want. But it took that shock for me to really reevaluate my dreams. What is the dream? And to step out as an artist, because there's here I've developed all this
behind the scenes stuff, right? Yeah.
Behind the scenes stuff. My God, you're hanging out with Paul McCartney. You're hanging out with all these. You're the trusted guy. You're the hotshot piano technician for Quincy Jones, for Barbra Streisand, for the highest echelon of the music industry. For me to step out of that means I'm going to have to go, hi, I'm an artist too, So there's this risk of losing face, of being thought of as a fraud, of falling flat on my face, and maybe it'll be the worst of both worlds, where I lose credibility now as a piano tech. Oh, you're not really a serious piano tech. You can be both. You can be, you can be whatever you want to be,
Let me ask you, Dave, why is it so common? Because you and I have talked about this several times over the last few years that we've been doing this podcast. It's like, why does it take such dramatic and drastic measures for people to wake up and get after it? Like, we don't bend until we get cancer. We don't bend until somebody dies. We don't bend until we're in so much pain that our marriage is on the line. And so help everyone understand, Dave, why we wait until the pain comes our way before we do something. What is that? You must have thought about that or studied that along the way.
And if I may interject right before your response, Dave, one of my favorite sayings is, we change when the pain in the present exceeds our fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So that's my take on that. And I would love to hear yours.
Well, first off, the short and easy answer is we do 90+% of everything that we do through the day on autopilot. So you do today what you've done yesterday, which is the same as what you've done the week before. So getting out of those routines, there has to be something to shake things up, to move you out of those routines. Everybody has a little different risk tolerance. So there are some people that are very risk averse. There are some people that are more adventurous and more willing to take a chance. So that's kind of something that we all have to struggle with to some degree or another. For somebody who's very risk averse and who likes predictability and stability and to be able to know what the next step is, it really takes something like a death or a divorce or getting fired from a job or something that, you basically get picked up by your shirt collar and tossed into the deep end of the pool, and then you got to figure out how to swim right away. Right. For other people that are a little bit more risk tolerant, maybe they think it through, but it still takes a bit of a push to break out of those patterns, but maybe less so. Maybe the excitement of what could be is enough of a drive to kind of break them out of the habit to take that risk. But also too, coming from a broken family, there's always going to be some degree of fear and doubt and maybe self-esteem doubt. Am I good enough? Do I have what it takes to make it? That can be kind of a negative to hold you back. But in your case, I think one of the things that seems to have contributed to the success is you cultivated relationships with people over many years, right? So working as a piano tech, you've worked with people, you've asked nothing of them, you weren't there as a wannabe, like trying to, push an agenda or push demos on people all the time, right? Because you get that all over the place, right? You were just doing your job and you did it well, and you developed genuine relationships with people without asking anything in return. Right. So when the time came for you to have a sincere request, like, hey, I have this creative stuff that I'm working on, I think you probably met a lot of positive response because you've built this well of goodwill over many years.
That's exactly right. You and it's always kind of it's something that has to be kind of fleshed out with every relationship. Sometimes it's just a very, very strict professional relationship, but generally speaking, there is a friendship that develops. Chick Corea was a tuning client of mine. He's one of my very first big clients. He's a iconic jazz musician who's no longer with us, but he came to respect my musical opinion. And it would be this wonderful ritual where he would tune the piano and then he would come out. I would tune the piano and he would come out and play something for me. And I would stick my head inside the piano and listen. And he came to appreciate my musical opinion. And what do you think of this? And so case by case, I would have to kind of feel out where they were with,
right.
Number one, I'm there as their piano technician. And then over time, I'd kind of find, expand the boundaries of our relationship. That was the case with Dan Fogelberg. Dan Fogelberg really became a dear friend and kind of a mentor to me in many ways. He was like a big brother. He was an incredible recording artist.
Let's just have a little gossip talk for a hot second, because, you had a really cool and exciting career. I was a radio and television personality for 27 years, and I had what I call probably about 100 pinch me moments.
Yeah.
And I had probably 10 moments where what I call like, what the fuck is this? Like, where am I right now? And how is this even my reality?
Right.
Do you have a couple of stories like that, man? Do you have a couple of stories of some fairly well-known people and experiences that you've had together that you're willing to share?
Well, let's start with.
And then we'll get back to the trauma and all the bullshit. But let's have a little fun for a minute.
Let's get down to some fun gossip stuff right now.
Why not? This is people love this stuff. Why not? Right?
Well, so there's meeting a celebrity, and there's meeting royalty. Yes. And then there's meeting a Beatle, guys. Yeah, Let me tell you, I don't care how many celebrities you've met. When you meet a Beatle, especially for somebody of my generation, where the Ed Sullivan Show, the whole, the Beatles music is worked deep into your DNA. When you meet Paul McCartney, or in my case, it's just the most bizarre thing to see this. Wow, he's actually a human being.
Is he tall, short? Give us, what is he? Is he about? He seems tall.
I guess he's, for some reason that doesn't register in my mental database of if he was taller or shorter than me, but I suppose just maybe a little bit taller than me. But so again, I'd helped develop this MIDI adapter for acoustic piano, and people were just like rolling out the red carpet for me, and so I'm going to go to his studio, and the first meeting was like this brief little meeting of the night before that I would demonstrate it to him. So it was like a Friday night, and you must be Jim. He was like, shit, man, my hero just addressed me by my name. And because his peer, David Foster, had said, you got to get Jim Wilson to do this thing. And so I was in England and went to his studio in the south of England. And I guess you must be, I want to say, Paul.
Yeah, right. What do you do? You act like you don't know him, or are you?
Well, well, there was that moment. I got a little bit of a chuckle out of him, which kind of made my nervousness ease a little bit. And then we chatted, and fortunately I could fall back on my expertise. I'm a respected piano technician, and I'm not only going to install this MIDI adapter, but I could also do some regulation and voicing on your Hamburg Steinway D. And sure, have at it. So anyway, I'm left alone in his studio that Friday evening, worked until 1 or so in the morning. And, before I got started, you kind of walk around and go, holy shit, that's the Hofner bass that, from the Beatles. That's, it's like, this is just iconic.
Right.
And so I somehow managed to keep it together when, because there was a professional thing of I'm here on a mission to install. So I did my work. The Saturday morning rolls around, 10 a.m. He comes in, because the previous day he said, so what time? He said, I said, what time? He goes, tennis anyone? A little dad joke, tennis anyone? Yeah. Anyway, so 10 a.m. rolls around, he comes in, he's in a lighthearted mood. And I've kind of gotten over the previous, nervous thing. And now it's like, okay, there's a Beatle and here I am. And let me just kind of walk him through, here's how it works. And he's sitting on the piano bench, and I have to sit beside him to show him, it goes like this. You turn it on here. Here's how you transpose. And he got into this wonderful kind of groove. And yeah, I'm working on this song I'm looking for a middle eight, which means he's looking for a bridge. And me being the cheeky bastard that I am, I said, well, let's see, you're in the key of C. What about a B7 to B7 over E to A minor? Oh, okay. So he tries it. And he goes, hey, that's my yesterday change. All right. Yeah, I think I've heard of that song. How does it go?
Yeah.
Anyway, it just turned into this magical 4-hour hang, at the end of which he says, anytime you're in the UK, just give us a bell. And I would. I went to his Homer studio a dozen times. And so in the limo ride back to London, I'm thinking, how the fuck does an insecure West Texas kid end up there? And with that invitation, and ultimately road trips with Carole King and horseback riding with Fogelberg. And so that's kind of where the book starts. That my prologue of the book is that wonderful meeting with McCartney, and then ask the question, how do I end up here? And then it gets traced back to my childhood, that, being gifted with a guitar at the age of 7, how that had changed me, the man cave story and how that influenced and the trajectory of moving out to LA and try to pursue my dreams,
Yeah. And what's funny is, like, Dave, I'd be curious to get your take on this whole thing, because it must come off to the average, person who's not in the entertainment industry is like, what? You did? How did you make that happen? It had been years in the making. I mean, this meeting had been brewing for years based on what you've done. And everybody who has a story like yours has a version like yours. Like, everybody that I've met that's had an incredible interaction with somebody that's super famous or at a really high level, they all say, like, and I'll say it myself, I'm like, how does this little kid from Coon Rapids, Minnesota end up in Taylor Swift's room before her concert hanging out with her? How does that happen?
Exactly.
But the answer is, it just happened. I put myself in a position where those things were likely to go down, and they did.
And Dave, every celebrity that you meet was that insecure person at one time.
That's it.
Before they were famous, before they had a lot of success, trying to figure out, like, what's the next step for me.
But don't you think, and here's what I want to ask you about, Dave, like, it's easy to get lost in the limelight. And I know we went down gossip lane and we're sharing some great stories about, some well-known people that we've met. But let's be honest. For most of us, the day-to-day life happens in our homes. Jordan Peterson is famous for saying this. He's like, your life is what happens when you walk through your front door. Do your kids greet you? Do your wife greet you? Does your dog like you? Most of us, that day-to-day is going to be the biggest percentage of our lives. And so, Dave, maybe you could speak to this a little bit. How can we create pinch me moments in our own lives that don't involve a guy like Paul McCartney or Taylor Swift, but, a really incredible relationship with your wife, an amazing relationship with your kids? How can we create those pinch me moments for us in our regular lives?
You have to be present in the actual moment.
Okay. Expand on that. So
one of the things that came to mind as we were discussing this is that poem by Rudyard Kipling.
Yes. If.
And the one line in there where he talks about success and failure and seeing both imposters just the same.
Yes.
So you don't want to get so elated and elevated by your successes, and at the same time you don't want to get so down and take failures all that seriously either. And if you can kind of keep a middle ground with it and just experience each moment as it comes, and so you're talking to Paul McCartney, hey, this is cool, and don't swoon over it too much, but just be in the moment. You can think about it later, what you actually just experienced, but just be in the moment in real time. And with failures, like, hey, okay, like, failure is part of the process. It's an opportunity to learn. And instead of, beating yourself up and getting down and getting off track and not wanting to get back in the game again, figure out, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I regroup and go forward? So both successes and failures, keep an even tone with it, be in the moment, and just be curious about what the next step is.
Yeah.
Was that true for you, Jim, in those moments? Did you find, because I always
100%.
found myself unbelievably present in those moments. It's just the moment I locked eyes on the person, I was like, okay, we're having a moment here.
Right. This is real. This is going down. Just be here. Just chill the fuck out. And you know, that's exactly it. And I describe in the limo that this moment in the limo where that the mental Novocaine that I had used of, hey, this shit happens all the time, you know? He's just a guy and I'm just a guy. And here we are talking about music. I mean, what's the big deal here? So that was kind of the mental Novocaine that I had that kind of helped me kind of be in the moment. This ain't no big deal.
But that's
that wears off. And then after the fact, you go, holy shit, what just happened? But 100% you have to be there. And when you lock eyes, as you said, Matthew, when you lock eyes, there's something in you that goes, okay, this is a human being. I'm a human being. And yes, there's all the other stuff around that individual kind of fades away because they, you know, the truth is that they are humans. And as you said, Dave, they had their insecure moments as a kid and that kid is in there too. So.
Well, and I would say too, if you look at how many celebrities struggle with addiction and really get into self-destructive patterns, that fear and doubt follows them into their success for a lot of people. I mean, there are some people that are famous and pretty well balanced, but I would say probably many more struggle with success and feel that they don't deserve it or they dive into the excesses of it and get themselves into trouble.
It's funny. I just listened to the Smartless podcast today. The guys were interviewing Henry Winkler, the Fonz.
I did too. Yeah.
Have you listened to this one?
Yes.
And he literally is what you're talking about, Dave. He's like, after the Happy Days was done, I was like, I'm so insecure. How do I ever top this? And literally 40 years later, he just wraps up his series, Harry, I think it was called. And he asked himself, Barry, and he asked himself the same question. He's like, okay, I'm done with this. Now, like, what do I do next? And so it's amazing to me that even the most, and I think that's the thing that I'd like to bridge the gap on, is we have a tendency to look at these folks that we know their names and we go, wow, they never have any struggles. Like, wow, they must get everything they want. Like, wow, it must be so easy for them to navigate the world, when the truth is that they're so much like you and I. The only difference is they know when to tell that voice to shut the fuck up because they are going to go and get after something. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah. They know they know when to tell that voice to shut up because they've got bigger plans. Or, you know, okay, that voice is part of me too. It's trying to be of service. You know, just like when you're meditating, you know, you kind of, you don't go, those thoughts, gotta suppress those thoughts. It's like, no, you just go, just like a little kid that just came up to you. It's like, thank you so much. I see you, I acknowledge you. And, you know, you just have to kind of take those thoughts and not let them be the bigger part of you. You know, sometimes that's easier said than done when, you know, I'm about to go do a concert. Again, the first one that I've done in a long time. There's a group in Amarillo called the Friends of Fogelberg and they do this benefit. They've been doing it for 15 years, ever since he announced that he had prostate cancer and would ultimately die from that. They did this benefit to raise money. And this is back in my hometown of Amarillo. And they've been doing it for 15 years. And somebody said, hey, you know who's actually a friend of Fogelberg's is Jim Wilson. He's from our hometown. So I'm going back there in September to do that, and it'll involve playing a couple of songs. And you know, there's that scary dragon that I've had to slay again and again and again. Love that. Yes.
You know, it's like, here it is. Okay, it's my chance once again. There's 33 chapters in my book. The final chapter is called Slaying the Dragon. And it kind of all leads up to this concert that I produced. and I sold out this 1,300 seat performing arts center in Amarillo. It was the very first artist to sell this thing out. And, I tell the story of kind of, I do all my checklists of everything, getting it produced. And then there I am arriving an hour or so before, and I see people dressed up in suits, streaming in. I'm thinking, fuck, those people are coming to hear me. And, and all those fears, the anxieties, it's riding this Bronco, and, or maybe a better one is like the wave, the tumultuous wave in the ocean. And you just got to get up on that surfboard and try to do your best to keep your balance and be up on top of the wave. And if you are present enough, then you can respond in the moment and ride the wave safely to shore, which is what I did. It's like, shit, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Wilson. And you walk out and there's 1,300 people, applauding and okay, I got to deliver. I gotta be here. And one of my favorite images that I'll say along these lines, Kenny Werner, he wrote a book called Effortless Mastery. And it's about that zone that every performer, every artist, every athlete tries to get into, of you're really in that zone, in the moment. And he talks about when because he's a performer as well, and he'll play a note and he'll say to himself, that's the most beautiful note I've ever heard. In other words, he tries to get himself into that zone of, I'm not the performer, I'm one of the audience members. And if you get really into that wonderful zone, all the scales that you've done, all the practicing, all that is now way behind you. That doesn't even register in your consciousness. You were in that moment. You were hearing that music along with the rest of the people.
All flow.
And what's that?
It's all flow.
All flow. They end the flow, man. And when you get in that flow, it's a magical space. And I was enough into that flow that I could feel the magic. And of course, the danger is becoming aware of that. I go, oh shit, I'm in the flow. No, you aren't. You just kicked yourself out of the flow.
Right, now you're gone. Yeah.
So it's that riding of that wave of trying to be in that moment. And so, and that concert is, you can see it online. Jim Wilson, A Place in My Heart was the name of the concert, and all the songs are there on the YouTube, and piece by piece, song by song.
You made it. You did it. It's funny. Yeah. I worked with a neurologist for like 6 months. This is going back maybe 7 or so years, maybe 6 or so years. And he was doing some brain mapping, and he was using the same technology that a lot of the NFL teams are using now to improve their performance.
Okay.
And so he put like this skull cap on your head. You'll get into this, Dave. I've never told you this story before, but he put this like skull cap on my head, and it was able to like sense and detect all the things that my brain was doing. And my goal was I had to watch this video game of a car driving. And as long as I just sat there and stayed with my breath, the car would stay in the middle of the lane like it was supposed to, and it would drive down. But the moment I tried to control the car, it would go off and it would crash, and I would have to start the exercise over again. And so it was really this exercise in how do you get into the thing, but not solely focus on the thing? How do you just, as we've talked about several times in this podcast, how do we just jump into flow, just be present, just enjoy the moment, and just be here now, is Ram Dass used to say. How do we just be here now? And so it's fun to hear you share a story like that, because it's true. We tend to get into things, and then the moment we overthink it or we analyze it or any of that stuff, we almost ruin the moment for ourselves, don't we, Dave?
You never want to be the tightrope walker that realizes how high up he is.
That's it.
That's exactly right.
That's it.
Yeah, if you stay focused on exactly where you're going, I'm looking at that point across the, if you saw the movie where the guy does the tightrope across through the World Trade Centers, from one building to the other, that's quite a movie. But can you imagine being that high up, and your focus has to be, so controlled, and this is where I'm going. I'm looking there, and you don't look down. You just keep moving forward and keep your balance. And yeah, it's that,
Yeah. I want to ask you as we wrap up here with our time together.
Okay.
The podcast is called Learn from People Who Lived It. And I want to give our audience an opportunity to really learn something from you, Jim. And so here's the question that I'm going to ask you. And Dave, I'd like to get your opinion on this as well. You seemingly figured out the special sauce at 9 years old, in that moment of clarity where you moved in and you took the bull by the horns and you said, no, this is what I'm doing. That was the first time that you can recall going, when I see something and I visualize it and I'm going to go get it, and I got it. Okay, so here's my question. How do you handle, Jim, those moments where you don't get it right and you make your mistakes and you find yourself in a spot of, failure from time to time? What's the Jimmy Wilson recipe for putting it back together, man, for putting it back on the tracks? What are some of the tools that you use?
Oh, goodness. That's a tough one. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It was really a pleasure, and we'll get to that one on the next podcast.
See you next time, everybody.
Damn you, Matthew. You pulled the gotcha moment. Oh man, that potential for falling flat on one's face happens all the time. And I just finished a 4-year marathon of writing my book. It began in the pandemic, where I said, okay, I'm going to cobble some of these stories. People seem to light up when I tell them the story about sitting on the same piano bench as Paul McCartney. Well, I got to write that down. Well, this going sledding at midnight with Dan Fogelberg on his ranch. I got to write that. So I'm writing these things together and cobbling these things down. And then eventually it becomes a much bigger narrative of who I became in the process of pursuing my dream and the obstacles that I encountered. And just in my journey as an artist, which is what my book is about, my journey as an author is as, fraught with potential obstacles as well. It was a 4-year process, very soul searching. I had to really kind of dig deep. And if you want the memoirs that really connect with me are the ones where they reveal their humanity. Yes. So I knew that I wanted to leave some blood on the page. Well, then the tightrope becomes, well, you want to leave blood on the page, but you don't want to leave vomit on the page. Right. So, so when am I oversharing? And, I learned about the craft of writing. So I hit obstacle after obstacle, and now I just finished doing the audiobook version of Tuned In. And again, it's like we're sort of geared to look at problems, to solve problems. And it's kind of an evolutionary thing of this baked in of, that's how we evolve, as we confront problems and I churn on them until I get them solved. Well, ultimately, instead of focusing on the problem, you need to focus on the end result and the joy that you feel there. So when I fall and when I get trapped into the negative belief system, that's my first order of business, is to try to focus on what's the end result. My dad kind of baked into me from a very early age. He sold success motivational tapes in a whole bunch of other 27 professions that he did, selling everything. But the most profound was selling these success motivational tapes by Earl Nightingale and Dale Carnegie and Maxwell Maltz and all that. But his biblical phrase that he baked into me, it was, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So whatever it is that you focus on is going to grow bigger in your life. And if you want to focus on the negative, well, no one's here to stop you. Right. But that's going to magnify. So the challenge every time I fall or get into a rut is to look at the big picture. Where is it that I want to go? let me just see that in my mind's eye, and let me see my book becoming a bestseller, and indeed it became an Amazon bestseller and #1 in 4 different categories on Amazon. And now this next thing is my audiobook. And I really, really want this to connect with people. And we spent so much time. We incorporated 37 pieces of my music into this. And it's just, who knew that when I was composing all these pieces over the last 20 years, I was literally composing the soundtrack to my life, because every single one of these pieces that we incorporated as an underscore to this story or a segue between this chapter, every single one feels like it's a bespoke composition that I composed for that moment. And so, and then we did some cool sound design things too. So I'm super excited about that. And that's, I got a bunch of challenges ahead of me, and we're throwing my hat into the ring with this audiobook as a NARA submission for Grammy consideration. And
wow, man.
Yeah. So that's another mountain to climb, but
I'll tell you what I heard in your answer was, and Dave, you probably heard this too. He zooms out. He literally just goes, all right, I'm in a moment right now that doesn't feel great. Let me zoom out. Let me get the whole picture here and understand that this is just a part of the process. This is just one moment in time. And really where people can get, and Dave, I really want you to take over. So I'm about to hand you the ball, but where people can get themselves in a lot of trouble is they have that negative thought and they let they run with that negative thought rather than just taking it for what it is, which is just, it's a fleeting thought. It's one of 60,000. They're going to show up in my stupid little brain today. And I'm just going to move on. So Dave, same question for you. Somebody is really trying to achieve something. They're really going after something, but they get stuck and they fall down along the way. What are your go-to tips for somebody to pick themselves up and keep going?
Right. The balance is, if you have a desire, if you have something that you want to see happen, you can manifest that, and you can think about it, and you can have an intention to move in that direction. And the way I look at the balance is, you always want to apply gentle pressure. Right. So you want to move in a particular direction. You want to orient your thoughts in that direction, start laying the groundwork for it. But don't insist that the path has to be a particular way. Right. And that's where I think people get stuck is, they plan it out to such a degree that, okay, this is the next step. And then this is the next step. Life almost never goes that way. So I think you have to find the balance between keeping the big picture in mind and the ultimate direction in mind, and then kind of be open to the process and be flexible to step with each next step that comes, right? Sometimes things get off balance. Sometimes there are other things beyond your control that kind of take you off the path for a bit. But if you're sure where you're going, then you have a lighthouse out in the distance that you can get yourself kind of reoriented back toward again. So where I think people get derailed is insisting that it has to be a particular way, and then when it's not, then they get discouraged. They get thrown off by it. All the negative thinking comes back again. Maybe some of the early childhood patterns of failure start to reemerge, because they're always going to be there in the background too. You have to work through, and then you get discouraged to the point where you stop moving toward the goal. Just accept derailments as part of the process, accept failure as part of the process, embrace it, learn from it, and then get back on track again.
One thing is so clear to me, and that is how fucking proud Claude would be of you and is of you, right? Like, I mean, you did the thing, man. Like, you talked about how successful he was and how he was able to just do anything he set his mind to. And in this moment where he leaves the earth, you sort of take on that same mentality with this extra superpower of, I want it so bad. There's nothing that's going to stand. If I have to stay up all night long reorganizing the house to move myself out of the kitchen to get into this dark room so that I can have some privacy, and you just kept applying that. But now with this added focus of Claude's energy, which said, go get it, dude. Like, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
No.
Well, here's to leaving some kind of mark. One of my favorite quotes in a song is by Sean Colvin.
Oh, love Sean Colvin.
She
Yeah.
says, may we all find salvation in professions that heal. And my take on that line is, may you find some sort of peace and sense of self worth and accomplishment by being of service to other people. So in some way or another, with every album that I create, with this book, with my audiobook, my prayer, my hope is that it finds some kind of meaningful value and adds some kind of value to people's life, and it inspires them on their journey, creates value, brings them a little bit of calm in the morning when I listen to my music, whatever it is. Just I want to move the needle in that direction of doing some kind of good in the world. So that's my redemption, I think, as an artist.
I love it, man. It's called Tuned In, Memoirs of a Piano Man. It's out on Amazon. As you mentioned, there's an audio version on the way. And I understand you have cameos on the audio version from, again, a bunch of nobodies, people you haven't heard of them before, Dave, but like Martin Short, Ray Romano, Lisa Loeb, Rob Morrow, Ed Begley Jr., who I just find to be one of the most fascinating people on planet Earth. And that is scheduled to be released, according to my notes, on August 1st, correct?
Yes.
Oh, man. Continued success to you, Jim. So fun to visit with you today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, guys. What a joy to speak about this deep and meaningful stuff.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.